With more and more kids being diagnosed with autism, parents are more concerned than ever about the development of their children. And often parents, when their children are not meeting milestones, will find themselves searching for what is autism. Well, before we can talk about what the signs and symptoms of autism is in young children, we have to first understand what autism is. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. So what that actually means is that the signs and symptoms of autism will change over someone's lifetime. So when we're talking about what the signs of autism are, oftentimes what we're really talking about is what are the signs of autism in young children. Typically, someone who has a child who's already diagnosed, maybe is a teenager and maybe is an adult, will not be looking for what are the signs of autism, right? When parents are looking for what are the signs of autism, what they're really asking is, should I be worried that my young child may have autism? So I'm going to go over some of the early signs and red flags that a child could be on the autism spectrum. And again, we're going to keep into mind that all of these things will take place before the age of 3. So one of the biggest red flags, or one of the biggest reasons parents often will search for, does my child have autism, is because of a language delay, because their child is not meeting the language milestones. Now that can certainly be one sign of autism, but in fact, just the lack of language doesn't make a child likely to be autistic. Children that are diagnosed with autism from a very early age, as early as 10 months old, they have a profound lack of interest in looking at others. You'll notice that they don't smile. They don't pay attention to faces. They're not doing any sort of imitation. Now, sometimes language does develop in terms of babbling, but that language is non-communicative. Kids will not point. They will not imitate things. And some of these things happen at a really early age. By 12 months old, your child should respond to their name. When you call them, they should turn around, they should smile, and they should look at you. By the time a child's 15 months old, they're already pointing out tons of things in their environment. The number one sign of autism is when kids are not pointing things out for you. Typically, if a child's happy, they'll take whatever's making them happy and they'll show it to a child. So that is really, more than language, one of the number one signs of autism. Oftentimes these symptoms appear, but because the child is so young and because of the fact that really children do mature differently, oftentimes they just develop them a little later and they kind of grow out of the symptoms. It doesn't mean they're growing out of autism. It means they didn't really have autism in the first place. Really, once a child hits 18 months old, if these signs are still present, it's a really good indication that a child is likely to be autistic. And most often, when a child is diagnosed at 18 months old, that diagnosis is good and it does stay for a lifetime. So we're going to go over some of the things that you may not realize to look out for if you think your child may be autistic. So lack of communication. Now, oftentimes, children that are autistic, they do start talking. They'll start labeling things. They'll label everything. In fact, I have kids that I work with that are diagnosed with autism, and they can tell you the name of anything. Maybe they're 2 years old and they know all their numbers. They know all their letters. They know all their shapes, all their colors. They know the trains. They know all the names of the cartoon characters they watch. They can tell you every single animal. Maybe they can tell you every single dinosaur. You're amazed at how much language they have. And yet, when you walk into a room, they may not be able to say hi. When you leave, they may not be able to say bye. And they may not be able to communicate what they actually want. And that's because oftentimes in children with autism, language develops, but it's not communicative. Now, this is often typical in children that are not cognitively impaired. So sometimes kids with autism, they have cognitive impairments. And then it's easier to pick up on the fact that they're autistic, especially for parents, because of the fact that they're probably not talking because they're more delayed. And, kids that are talking, it may be harder to pick up on the fact that they're autistic, oftentimes until they get a little bit older and we start to see that they respond differently in social situations. That's when it becomes easier to recognize autism in children that don't have any cognitive impairments. So what are some of the signs you can look for if your child does have language and you're still concerned that it may not be communicative and you think they still might be on the spectrum? Well, one of the things to look out for is sensory behavior. So oversensitivity or undersensitivity. So if your child really, really craves touch, like they're just touching you all the time, or they're rubbing parts of their body all the time, maybe they're pushing their head into a part of your body, that's a good indication that your child could have autism. Now, this is part of sensory processing disorder as well. So this is alone not a sign, but all children with autism have some sort of oversensitivity and undersensitivity to senses. So whether or not it's vestibular senses and your children are running around a lot and they're jumping up and down a lot, sometimes repetitive body movements like rocking back and forth or flapping their hands, becoming interested in parts of objects like spinning wheels, or rather than playing with a dollhouse, opening and closing the door of the house. These are all good signs of autism. So what should you do if you think your child is autistic? Number one, it's very important to talk to your pediatrician about seeing a developmental pediatrician or a pediatric neurologist. Sometimes the waiting periods are really, really high. It takes a really long time. So you want to start this process earlier rather than later. Oftentimes parents think, well, I'll just give him 6 more months. And then in 6 months, I'll do something about it if he still isn't caught up. Oftentimes it takes 9 to 12 months in the United States, depending upon the state that you live in, to get an appointment with a pediatric developmental pediatrician. So it's really important you start that process early. You can always cancel the appointment. If you want to know really as a parent, hey, should I be concerned? One of my favorite resources is the MChat. It's a simple parent checklist. It's going to ask you questions. It's totally free. You can find the tool online. I have it in the links below. And it's just, it'll ask you questions and it'll tell you whether or not your child is likely to be autistic or not. And you can then bring that information to your pediatrician, bring the MChat to them and say, look, I took this assessment online. I have concerns my son or daughter could potentially have autism. And this checklist is telling me I do have a reason to be concerned, and make sure you get that evaluation. Again, if you're watching this child, your child is probably under the age of 3. The other thing to know that in the United States, the Department of Health will provide early intervention services to children that are missing milestones. So whether or not your child winds up getting a diagnosis, you can go through early intervention to get them help and get them caught up and make sure that they start getting the services they require as soon as possible. So these are some of the warning signs of children of autism, the red flags of autism in children under the age of 3. I really hope you found this video helpful. If you're watching this video, chances are, like I said, you're a parent and you're really, really concerned about your child. And I can't even imagine how hard that is. But what I do want you to know is that I want to support you on this journey, whether or not your child gets a diagnosis or whether they just need a little extra help. I want to be on your team and support your family. Head over to my website, hopeeducationservices.com. I have a ton of free resources on there. I have 6 ebooks. You can download them, start reading them, and start helping your child today.